Sa-da-dun-dun. Hey, what's going on? Good to see you this morning. So the last few days I've been dorking around a little bit. Let me give you a quick tour here. Looks like I don't have it open. And let's just start at the beginning of the beginning. So on a Friday, headed into a weekend with I've been helping some college kids that are in like this intro to Python class, and so they have a big delivery this weekend. And as I made myself available to helping them with Python, I thought I'd chase along in C Sharp, a language I'm a little more familiar with. And let's begin with Friday. And so Friday was just this dragon game. And it all began sort of with a console app that said hello. And let me walk you just through some of the highlights. We'll just kind of move through the logic flow. But the entry point to the application is really just these two lines. Everything else is boring old plumbing stuff to kind of set up a dependency injection container. And those of you that aren't as familiar or are looking for new metaphors, I like to talk weird. So, uh, essentially, anytime you write code or think about your code, if you always start with a wrapping bit of code, right? And that's what a dependency injection container, part of the whole theory here is you have something that's running your app or running your code or running, we'll get into it. And inside of that container, while your application's running, we could do some things around the edges and with the plumbing works. And if your application, for instance, the dependency injection functionality is simply, you know, build a object lifetime management, a scope management cycle outside of your application loop, and then you can pass and manage those things in. And so the injection container, which we can see, I think here, I just tossed in the same file, outside of the application launching, we go ahead and introduce a few services and behaviors. I'll sell you on the idea later. Just know the entry point to our application, it's generally speaking these two lines. So we've got this player service from that container, and the container is going to worry, does it need a new? Does it already exist? Have you told it to manage the scope of that object as transient or what do they call it now? Scoped or singleton. And so those are patterns. And just know anytime you're writing code and it gets annoying, you see a pattern, you're like, I wrote this before, or this select is getting out of hand, or this if is getting out of hand, or something about this feels really brittle. You'll look for a pattern because somebody's been here before you and they can help you unbrittle your code and get things nice and clean and separate. All right. So this player service says, uh, well, we're initiating the player service from that outside container. There's a few ways to do this. Go give us whatever you got going on for that guy. And once he gets here, ask him to run. All right. So if we look in our game player service, of course, it's got run. And in this case, if you're running it in the console app, then this will be our experience, we hope. I haven't run it this way in a few days. Let's see. .NET run. Let's call me Dragon Hester. All right, welcome, Dragon Hester. You're in a room 1 of 1, so all the behaviors really are about, um, going north, east, 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 south, south, and we could see that the rooms are changing. Let's find an interesting room. There is one, you can't move east, right? So just enough code to get up some rooms, get some inventory in some rooms. This room has 3 things in it. I haven't done anything yet with picking up or looking at items, etc., but have begun to put some phraseology in there for some synonyms, etc. And great, so let's quit. I also let's see if this still works. No, Bob. New. Maybe I didn't implement that here. All right. So So brilliant. Let's look at how that's put together before we leave and go look at more interesting things. The player's service is injected, and he's really in charge of building and facilitating the gameplay. First thing we do is get a new game here, which is inaccurate. Please hold. All right. So we new up the game board. We ask it to give us a new game. And it says, okay, you're going to get a player, you're going to get a villain, it's going to have some rooms. We're going to go to level 1 and get its rooms. So if we look at some point, there's rough edges. So here's a collection of potential rooms. And here's a list of the items that could show up in the room that have been used. Right now that would be empty. And then as we go through, we're going to, in this case, not allow items to be used more than once. So now we have the item service also has been injected. If we come over here and look at our services, we're going to find this item service. It knows how to get a random item out of the list of, you guessed it, a whole chunk of nasty could be items that quickly lost their coolness. All right. And so get random items is going to attempt to get up, between 1 and 4 items per room. And if we were to give it bad inputs I hadn't really dealt with, so just saying, hey, if you, for instance, have fewer items than rooms, or give away all, there's a few moments I imagine where I would want to defend for this code better. So I just added this little tick out to make sure we never hit a moment where we spun forever by accident. All right, and I was silly. You make these choices as you go. In this case, I set tick out to the high end, and then here we see a decrementer. And if tick out ever, hits 0 or maybe less than equal to 0 is in some ways, as a human, more better, but the robot's fine here. At which point it would finally break out of that loop. And if tick out was greater than 0, go do something. If not, that room's going to have a missing item. That's cool. All right, so let's go back here. And so for each of those items, if we haven't already used it, we're going to add it to this used inventory, add it to the room. And again, otherwise, potentially there will be some holes where the room won't receive the inventory it randomly might have received because it's already been used. That's fine. All right, and then we're going to plot. We'll want to random up at some point where and how the villain gets in. And for now, the player always starts in 1-1 on floor 1. But that would, again, be something you'd probably move to the database. It's going to move around, etc. All right. So if we go back to the gameplay service, got our game start date. I did come back and add it to a database, so there's a few of these things here going on. We're going to take that input off the console line. We're going to attempt to set the player name first, before we enter our game loop. We're going to say hello, and then forevermore, this is, the outer edge of our game loop itself. And so we're going to be stuck here until we are done playing console side. All right, so we come in, we're going to draw the screen and base it on that input loop. If we go to the game board's draw screen, it hands it off to a gameplay view, which we should probably hand it so then it can easily map the two. In this case, we just get to a point where the screen is able to manage its own redrawing a little bit. And so if I wanted to make it more and more clever, add some animation, all sorts of goofy things could be done. Even though it's a console, I'm slapping it around and treating it like any other output. All right. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. What else? Anything else interesting before we get out of here? Input, go, quit, die. All right, great. So that was kind of the end of Friday. As I was happy I barely got a game to run. It took about, I don't know, 6.5 hours. And I did start with .NET New Console. And any other patterns here? We got our services. We talked about levels. So we have this level 1, potential layouts. We looked a little bit at this idea of models, and so some folks are pretty early and they're still writing things all in one file, etc. But pretty quickly you're going to want to break those out and etc. Strategies. So this might be an interesting moment to look at. So back in the gameplay viewer, the input handle, consider player input. So I'm gonna, in a minute, I'll show you a much better example. Here I'm physically adding the strategies, but there's no reason to do that. We can just ask that container on the outside, hey, everybody that implements this interface, go ahead and let me know and build them into a list. And then we would, so forget where this data comes from, just the idea that we have strategies that try to do things. And so for each bit of our code that implements that strategy, and so we could continue to grow and grow and grow and add and add and add strategies, and this would take care of itself. We're going to loop through any potential strategy that is in our assembly, and we're going to ask it to try to do things. And so every one of these strategies, up until the point one of them responds happy, try to do things is called. Look for villain, try search, try to add inventory. Most of those are fairly empty. The to move is a little more developed. And again, we have edges. Would want to work some of this out because this is just going to get uglier and uglier. But had a limited amount of time and was looking for a result. All right, so as we consider in, is it plausible? Is it possible? Is it plausible? Does this have to do with what I like to know about? Is it possible this guy doesn't have any physical constraints? Like, oh, yes, he does. What did I say here? Ah, when I wrote it, and I will separate this back out, the is possible is actually happening in this try set. And so those are still two words I like. So syntactically, is the language reasonable? And then physically within the world of the game, does it make sense that you can do what it is? If you're trying to pick something up, maybe you're already too heavy. If you're trying to move, maybe there's a wall there, etc. All right, and so within the game board, this try to set player position, we're going to grab the room that we're currently in. We're going to attempt to look in our rooms dictionary for the first room that matches the XYZ coordinates we've handed in. And then if we're able, we find an existing room, then we're going to move the player to that. Otherwise, we're going to say I was unable to do this thing you've asked of me. All right. And if that works, we're just going to start heading it back. And I came up with this little moniker pretty early. Things that start with a -1 are error messages. All right, cool. So that got us our game. It runs. Every time you run it, the room's items are all being randomly moved around, just like we asked them to. So that's pretty cool. All right, went down Friday, helped some of the folks with their Python, and got up Saturday, and it was just terrible outside weather-wise. So I was like, you know what? What would I like to do next? Well, most of these folks are in Discord, and that's how we spend most of our time together is through Discord. So if I've done a good job, without too much effort, I should be able to take the game I built and reuse it in some sense, right? I should be able to, for instance, before we leave, I should be able to add something like this run external, and with very little effort, I should be able to accept something other than the console and the human doing the interactions. So if you give me a username, in this case here, I'm taking that from Discord, and you give me a string, why would I not be able to consider that? There's a few things you need to think about. It's a disconnected state. So the game, in a sense, will have to be recreated and destroyed on every request. And we'll have to remember where people were, support multiple users, these kinds of things. That disconnected state will require we jot some notes somewhere, and I opted to just throw it in a database, and that was easiest and within my grasp. So the difference here on run external, we do need to attach to that data because it is disconnected. It's not just one game running local in memory. It's a thing on a server getting lots of requests, right? Disconnected state. If data existed, load it up. If not, pretend it's a request for new. If they already had data, clear it out. If we're in a new scenario, get my game board, set up that new game. This code here is verbatim below. Maybe I'll figure out how to mash those even. And then when we're all done, save wherever that Discord user was at. And then finally, if we're not in a new game and or we fall out of that loop, consider that input. Jot down the last move date for the database so we can have a sense of how old these games are getting. Save that result and draw out the screen. And so this is just reusing all the same components we already built. We didn't have to write or change like anything. That's pretty cool. All right, so Saturday morning we get up and we say, let's create something that connects to Discord. And again, .NET new console. Was this a console app? Yep. Come in to wire it up to have a inversion of control, dependency injection container. And now we again have our I ran into a moment, don't worry about it. I'll fix Discord. It's not your eyes. But right, so in this case we're using a slightly different pattern to manage that injection container, practicing, playing with things. We're going to get in here, get into this command handling service, and then we're going to get out, right? Command handling service, this wraps up. It's pretty boilerplate from the .NET Discord libraries and from Discord themselves. Basically, I'm going to get you wired up to Discord, and if we receive a message on any of our Discord servers, then that message is going to route in here. If it's not a user message and the source user, then get out of here. We don't want to listen to chatter and robots and things we can ignore. All right, and then so we get here to this handler exists for prefix. And so we're again doing this trick where message handlers is some number. If we go to startup, we'll see register all types of iMessage handler. And so everybody that is implementing iMessage handler is now going to be considered, and they'll each have an opportunity to process input. Right? Very similar pattern we saw a minute ago. All right, back here. And we're just going to loop through each one of those and ask, do you handle this type of message? And so each one of those says, here's my prefix. It's kind of a Discord thing. Here's my prefix. Here's my prefix. Great. And you see I'm dragging a couple of things through everything. You get yourself into a corner as a developer if you know that you need to support these variants like Spanish and English, as an example. Always start chasing both. Don't build English and then add Spanish later. That won't go well. And these strategies and all these things are driven out and necessitated by that desire. So honor those early, and your code will be rewarding you as you go. All right, so we have these handlers coming through our handling service, and we can talk to any of them. We will here in a second. And then of interest is that game. So the beginning, I just wrapped that game. And so the game player service, we saw that before. All of these are just being injected through our container from the same game. We didn't write anything new here. We're taking contract templates and implementations from the game and we're giving them back to itself. And then the game player service has been instantiated. So we can come down through here and kind of do the same thing, tear up the message, decide if it's something we care about, and finally hand it over to the gameplay service in that run external function that I showed you. So we want that Discord user's username, and then we want the message that they happen to send us. So admin knows how to say hello, Tribs knows how to say hello, and the Dragon game knows how to fire up the Dragon game, hand it some inputs, and then get out. All right. It also, if you just type DG, you'll get a nice little info message. All right. Let's introduce Discord. So if we come over here and we say DG, our code just ran. It says, here's all of our information. Let's do DG new game. DG move north. DG north. I have some shortcuts. Brilliant. So I am now in room 44. I have 0 items, and there's nothing interesting in this room. Give us an interesting room. All right, goat's head of health in this room. Uh, Give it a quick little exercise. Good, good, good. Tribs hello. Admin hello. All right, so all those little things we were just looking at, exercised and working. Too fun. So now we can talk to Discord, and that was most of Saturday, was getting Discord up and reworking the game around those edges so that we could talk to it without a console or a player interface, adding the database, and faking some level of persistence because every hit, you don't know what user or whatever, right? When you first build these things, you might build it so locally that you'd need to spin up 10 instances of the game and map them to ports, and like it wouldn't work, right? It just wouldn't work. All right, cool. So we had Discord working. We have a database persisting data, and it's all just playing the game. If we literally look here, sorry about that word, literally, but if we look here, we're just referencing that other project. We're referencing the game. As we finish developing and playing, this would simply be a reference to the DLL file, right? That is the game. Cool. So the next day, Sunday, the weather was still terrible. Kids were off doing other things. So I got up and set some new goals. I was like, you know what? What if I had a mobile web Angular app, responsive UI kind of app that launched beside Discord? And every time I talk to Discord and play the game, then I would also go hit an API, give myself the message, use that API to tickle some Socket.io signalr thing to update the mobile app, and then ta-da, the game slash whatever we're doing over here that's interpreting those Discord messages has an ease of ability to update a Sidekick mobile app. Why not? Again, .NET new. This time I had to mature a couple of things, so let's zoom out and look at the architecture that I chose. I did roll the overarching idea of the some parts of this up to core and infrastructure at the higher level. So this idea tribs the, I don't know what we want to call it, um, mobile app backend that's shared by other parts, has this idea of individuals and aliases and profiles and platforms and Discord servers. Great. It doesn't know about games or anything, not supposed to. And core then has, through infrastructure, a DB context so it can generate a database, etc. And then API just uses those projects and the game. So right now he just exposes a really terrible, it was very late, get me a danged game board. Should look like that. All right. Now I need to think a minute. How am I using this API? Ah. So that journey began with Angular mostly. So if we come down here to the Dragon app, this was .NET new Angular, and then it just takes a few minutes to go from Angular 8, which comes out of the templates, up to Angular 11, and the new templates were already net5, and so got everything updated and began to sort of build out just enough Angular app to support a screen with a button on it that I can practice the signalr component I'm going to show you here in a minute, talk to myself, and then if the game wants to talk to me, I'd be able to. And then thirdly, I have a server-side game loop that can respond to other events, and all three of those I stood up, kind of brought in. So this was .NET New Angular. This is .NET New Identity, and then I also upgraded all those dependencies. This is .NET New Web API, and then I taught it how to be a signalr app to handle real-time pub/sub socket communication. The um, identity server, I needed to break the identity out of the Angular app because the Angular app, the Web API, the signalr API, the signalr socket IO, we want all of those folks to be able to talk and share one identity provider. We also imagine we'll have multiple apps and multiple things going on, and in this case, they all share one identity provider, and then we bound that identity provider to Discord. All right, so let's see this up a little side by side here. So over here is our Angular app. If we come right in, it's pretty boring. We can log in. We don't have to. So far, we could choose Discord. We could say yes. And it knows who we are. Great. All right. We could also go to this Dragon Quest, and I could say test, and I see test, but I don't see, that's not hard-coded. If I open it in another browser and say test A, they both saw it. So if you were watching from your house, you would have also just seen test A. So this is a real-time signalr connection. If we come back over to Discord and we say move north, we see that full cycle. So Discord, game, as part of that backend process, after it's done updating the database and sending the message to Discord, it then broadcasts the message over to signalr. We can see signalr then taking that very simple tragic message update in the middle of the night code and passing it on to the signalr tickle. So signalr is facilitating that. If we go back over here, and I'm going to change this too, but it's how it is today. It's how it is today. All right, and so here is the implementation of the other half of signalr, well, the other third, and then I didn't fall in love with, but I explored a couple of ways to bring signalr into Angular. And at the moment, I just have this signalr service. And this signalr service is injected into the page directly. And the page itself is doing way too much cleverness, but you know, got something started. It's not a terrible place to start. Now we also see a final little bit before we bail out of the nerd parts. On that pub sub, we have a background service that we are firing up. Yeah. And so this is always running, and this is the web server will keep it up and running in the background. This background service, periodically right now, it's just pinging the front end, and that's where we get this final little bit of noise. But that's the idea of a server-originated event, client-originated event, and then a different server originating a different event. I hope that was fun for you. I hope that was, I don't know, encouraging if nothing else. If you're in this net5 .NET Core stack, you're certainly in a great family of tools, and very quickly I was able to pull off quite a bit, right? Not bad for a 3-day self-mini hackathon of goofiness. And in the end, another day or week or two, and little moments where we pivoted. I've got the security 80% of the way wired up, protecting everything. So finishing wiring that up and bring SSL in and some of these other things. But yeah, pretty cool, pretty cool. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you got something out of our time together. Keep learning, keep building things. For a final trick here, let's see, what room am I in? I am in room 4-3. In theory, if we go over here to one of my other fun little savers, and I say, look, I'm still in room 4-3! So there you go. Who knows what toys we come up with next, but multi-Discord server sharing a single game state across multiple servers. Oh, it's pretty cool. I hope you have an amazing day. Until next time, cheers. Bye-bye.